YouTube, what's the deal? It's your girl Jahira, and I am back. What's going on, everybody? And we're live. Who knew? I wanted to come in. It's funny how exigent circumstances tend to preface my entry into this forum. But I wanted to come in and get some stuff off my chest. So this is going to be a bit of a rant. I'm telling you now. I have to preface this with a disclaimer, which I normally do not love to do. But for the next, well, we'll just say for the foreseeable future, this is something that is going to come up. So I figured if I do it once here, I'll have it out of the way. And I will not have to do it again. This is not going to make sense to all of you, and I know that up front. It's really only intended for the people for whom it could be an issue or that it would affect. So lest there be any confusion, I'm going to do this really fast. Yes, I am in my yaboraje. And yes, I am a public figure. And yes, my godparents completely approve of what it is that I'm doing. And they understand why it has to be done. So, any issues that anybody has, they are more than available to answer any and all questions. Now, having gotten that out of the way, let's talk Kardashian. You know, it's funny. People have very kind of extreme binary opinions over this family and these group of people. Hello, viewers. And I am somebody who has never really had an opinion one way or another. I can't say that I'm a fan per se because I don't know them. I am familiar with the show. I'm familiar with the story, but I've never actually sort of engaged in what it is that they offer. And so there's that. I mean, I just don't, I have no personal investment one way or another. But, and y'all know, I'm not really one to do sort of the pop culture-esque videos in the first place. It's very rare that something like this comes up. However, as you know from my last video, I was a guest lecturer at Columbia University on the topic of decriminalizing sex work, which I attended and did, and it was amazing. So I felt like it would be almost hypocritical of me to perform in that capacity, in that kind of a venue, and then to, show. Okay. If y'all are hitting up the comments, I think I just turned them on. But yeah, I felt like it would be hypocritical to be in that kind of space and then not respond to something like this. So, lest there be any confusion, unless you've been living under a rock for the past 12 hours or whatever, evidently Rob Kardashian, in an effort to retaliate against his apparently unfaithful, I am unclear as to whether or not they're married, but I believe his wife, Black China, posted nude pictures of her to his Instagram. And basically denigrated her, calling her a cheater, bringing up receipts, what have you. And I guess the pictures were so graphic that his Instagram account has now been suspended. At which point I'm told that he went over to Twitter and re-uploaded all of the pictures that were on Instagram. And the pushback from the community, and people seems to be very divided, I mean, these things always sort of separate into factions, right? Your team China, team Rob, whatever the case is. The thing that brought me to a place where I felt like a video was warranted was the use of the term hoe. And how now Black China is a hoe. She's always been a hoe. Old MacDonald had a farm. E-I-E-I hoe. Like, it's just a lot of hoes flying around. That's all I'm saying. And so, damn self-extinguishing favor. And the thing that really kind of put the battery in my back was seeing a friend of mine on social media A reasonably evolved, woke, if you will, friend of mine go to that old cliche of you can't turn a hoe into a housewife. I made a comment on his status, and essentially, I'm slightly paraphrasing here, but I essentially said, it's okay, apple slices. I would have preferred to have missed this. I made a comment on the status, and I essentially said, like, you show me a woman who hasn't been called a hoe at least at one point in her life or for one reason or another, and I'll show you a girl who died too young to ever hear the word. A bit of an extreme statement, yes, I admit. But I hope you see my point here. As women, hoe, whore, slut. I think Jezebel's fallen out of fashion, but like if you're old and religious, you might have heard Jezebel. Those kind of words which seek to reduce one's sexuality into a shameful act are, spewed with the venom of 1,000 snakes all over the place, all over the world. You just hear that, Women in some countries get murdered on suspicion of seeking out sex. And so that word, which, there are those that have reclaimed it, but that word which holds so much vitriol and has such a marked history and is such a pointed and directed word, because we don't refer to men as hoes. We do. We don't. I'm sorry. Like, maybe amongst each other, maybe in mixed company, but we don't call men hoes in public forums generally. So it's a very woman-specific term. And again, it's predicated on this notion that a woman's sexuality, presumably because of, the procreation that might result as a result of such sexuality, is such a sacrosanct thing. And it's upheld to this impossible standard. And when I say impossible standard, let me explain. Because I've really been doing some thinking about this. I don't want to make some broad sweeping generalizations here, but generally, when you're speaking about cisgender heterosexual men and boys, sex, especially of a certain age demographic, sex is high up on the menu. Men want sex, okay? And please don't comment about the 2 men that you know in Albuquerque who never wanted sex ever. Like, I get it. Not all men, right? But men generally want sex. They want sex. They push for sex. They center sex as long as it's sex with them. They don't want to know about the sex you've had with anybody else but them. Again, generalizing, but still based in a certain modicum of truth. And so, as women, or as people who are attracted to these men, it's a tightrope walk, because you want to have sex, you want to attain pleasure, but you can't be as transparent about who you've attained such pleasure with, or how many people you've attained such pleasure with, or anybody besides the immediate man in front of you being the sole source of all the pleasure that you've obtained in the world. And so you have these great relationships that flourish and blossom in the whole 9 yards that are kind of predicated upon a lie, because I can't be as honest with you about the kind of sex I've had and who I've had it with for fear of being perceived as a hoe. It's fascinating in that sense. I think about these lifelong relationships that were basically based upon a woman's kind of whittling away at the truth of her sexual history for the sake of getting the guy. So they want this super sexually experienced woman, but they just don't want to consider the experience that it took in order for her to attain such, stature. So when you say about Blac Chyna that you can't turn a hoe into a housewife, my initial thought was, in no interview, no podcast, no radio show, there has never been some public declaration, to my knowledge and in my experience, from Blac Chyna that she wanted to be a housewife. And what is this notion that being a housewife is the goal in 2017? Nowadays, it's like we've taken this 1950s mentality with this 2017 like financial standards of the times and conflated these two things insofar that, these guys, they want the housewife, they want the cooking and the cleaning and the dusting and the whole 9 yards, but it's also, we're not going to survive on a single person's income. So you got to get to work too. I don't know about all of Blac Chyna's business ventures. Again, I'm very on the fringe of what's going on. The one thing I do know was the eyelashes. I know that she was selling lashes. She was selling false lashes. And I mean, I don't want to disrespect the lady, but I mean, I'm sure that there was some kind of tummy tea and some, fat busting, some shit or other. Like, whatever the case was, the whole Instagram business spiel. But I know that she was selling lashes. So what you have is a woman who was in a situation where she was exercising complete autonomy over her body and her sexuality in her job as a stripper, as an exotic dancer. And then you have this guy who, because he felt betrayed by her, posts up her nude pictures and somehow feels like this is revenge. I find that really confusing. That's very, very stymieing to me. I don't get it. But then on the other side of things, so here's this woman whose sexuality was at the forefront, who then leveraged that experience into becoming an entrepreneur, a mogul, a woman about her business. She leveraged the popularity gained from the exposition of her nude figure and parlayed that into a successful business career. Is that not the same thing, essentially, that Kim did? I am not necessarily saying that the two are completely one and the same. I mean, if you are to believe at face value the story that was told, the sex tape that Kim Kardashian West made with Ray J was never meant to get out. It was never meant to become public fodder. But I say it to correlate the idea of lemons into lemonade. Kris Jenner, who is arguably one of the most shrewd, methodical, calculating, and intelligent businesswomen that exist in pop culture right now, took an experience that left somebody mortified and built an empire on the back of it. And so we have this woman, Blac Chyna that is, who was dancing as a means of survival, gleaned popularity over her ability to do so, and then started to segue that into a business. It seems just really hypocritical on its face to me that Rob Kardashian, who witnessed what can happen when something that is not necessarily meant to be public fodder can surpass its own expectations and bring you mainstream acceptance, and then slut shame the very same person who is attempting to do the same thing. Now, again, I mean, I am not condoning stepping out on your marriage. I'm not, and I won't. But I also believe that women's sexuality and the issue of women and sexuality bring up this mob mentality like nothing else on earth. And it's done in a very specific way. It's done in a very specific way. I mean, nobody blasted Brad Pitt's naked pictures when he cheated with Jennifer Aniston, on Jennifer Aniston with Angelina Jolie. Nobody called Swizz Beatz a hoe when he was creeping around with Alicia Keys behind Mashonda's back. Like, that's not what we did, because we don't hold men's sexuality and virility and be fruitful and multiply whole mentality up to the same standard that we do women. And my whole thing is, when a man uses that you can't turn a hoe into a housewife thing, like, go call your mother and ask her if she's ever been called a whore or a slut or a bitch or a hoe, whatever the case is. Like, really call your mother and ask her if it's ever been implied that she was less than virtuous in any way possible, because your mother was not always your mother. You don't understand what I'm saying? Like, women have had this whole life prior to children, and we hold our mothers up to this really, benevolent figure that can do no wrong. And that may in fact be true to a degree, but a woman's chastity and a woman's virtue gets called into question all the time. And I think you might be surprised to find out the words that your mother has heard hurled at her prior to you, or before your memory, or behind your back, or whatever the case is. Like, it's so funny. Like, a dude, and some of these dudes out here would put their thing in a tree if it had a hole in it. But you expect these women to be like 3 rungs down on the ladder below the Virgin Mary. And that's just not always the case. I realize that this is rambly, and I'm sorry about that. And I really do appreciate all of y'all for watching. But my whole thing is just kind of like, we really have to dispel this ideology that a woman's sexuality, or lack thereof, or overconsumption of, by whatever standard you judge consumption of, is up for public debate. No, it's not good to cheat. No, it's not good to call the mother of your kids out of her name, or child, or whatever the case is. Everybody's wrong on all angles here. But I really just would like to see people examine their use of that term, what it means to be complicit in a society that upholds the Madonna whore complex, and how patriarchy and misogyny have begun to dictate the way that we, not begun to dictate, how they do dictate the way that we view women, and this impossible standard that we uphold them to. I think 20 minutes should do it. Those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think. Feel free to comment below. Take care of yourselves wherever you go. Please take my love with you. And as always, y'all, one love.